Hello and welcome everyone to this session as a part of the Financial Inclusion Week 2021. Our session, Invisible Barriers, Addressing Social Norms for Promoting Women's Entrepreneurship and Financial Inclusion. We're very excited to have a great panel and we'll get started. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Nisha Singh, and I am the thematic lead for Gender Transformative Solutions for FinEquity, which is convened by CGAP, a community of practice on women's financial inclusion. Costa, can we move to the next slide, please? All right. And in addition, our panel today is made up with Ankita Singh from UNCDF India, and she'll be talking about their work on social norms in India. And then Daria Bishkov from GIZ, who is working with the Her and Now project, which is GIZ and Government of India joint effort to address social norms. And I also have a colleague, Konstantin Pagnos, I don't know if I butchered his last name, from GIZ, who's helped us shape this session and will be supporting me through this session. So we have 60 minutes and a very exciting agenda. So we'll get started. I'm going to try and see if we can use the poll function in this platform. So Costa, can you move to the next slide? Okay, so and I'm going to need help from somebody on the FI Week team to pull up the poll. All of you should see the poll on the side in your panel. There should be a poll question. The first one is smart home devices such as Alexa, Google Home, etc. are 70% more likely to recognize male speech. Is are you able to see the poll? Costa, can you pull the poll onto your screen if you have it live? Yeah, so we're doing the first questions. Yeah, okay, so I see a few responses. Let's see if we get a few others. Everybody agrees with me? Can we close the poll, please? The first one. I'm not sure this technology is working the way it's supposed to. Oh, okay, it is. All right, so 90% of the respondents said it's true and 10% said it's false. It's actually true that most smart home devices, voice-activated algorithms respond more to male voices because that's what they're trained on. We're going to try the next question, which is women are risk averse, true or false? So if you can respond, and I'm going to give you 15 seconds to respond, and then we'll close the poll. All right, can we close the poll? Okay, this one isn't working. Okay, I'll just respond to it. Oh, it did work actually. So 60% said true and 40% said false. So this is not one of those that it's a definitive answer, but the fact is that there's a perception that women are risk averse because we have a default that we compare them to, which is male behavior. There might be another way of looking at this, which is men take far too many risks. And so women are, by nature, they're just being cautious. And so it's a matter of what is your starting point and what do you think is normal. I'm going to skip the third question, which was women and girls are responsible for 75% of the unpaid care and domestic work globally. The answer is sadly and of course true. Women spend a lot of time doing what is called unpaid care work. And that is because we assume that women should be doing this in many parts of the world, and this is part of what gender norms dictate. So that's the focus of our session today. So I just wanted to use some of these statements of how we think about norms and how they shape our thinking and how they play out in systems and in processes. All right, we'll move to the next slide. There we go. Sorry, there's too many animations on these slides, I think. So, gender norms and women's financial inclusion. As a setup, before I introduce our speakers for today, I just wanted to share what do we mean by norms. They're collectively held expectations and beliefs of how people should behave and interact in a specific social setting. And when we say gender norms, this is informed by their gender identity. So the expectations that come based on you being a woman, a man, or other genders. Breaking a gender norm usually leads to negative responses in the form of sanctions, which could be, being an outcast from your group, or it could be much more severe in the form of gender-based violence. And what is important to remember is norms are held in place by because they're collective expectations. There's always an influencer group whose expectations you are conforming to. So I wanted to mention a new technical guide that was just published by CGAP called Addressing Gender Norms to Increase Women's Financial Inclusion. And this guide, targeting funders and facilitators, really focuses on how do you understand norms because they influence the behavior of all market system actors and create, a system that doesn't work for women. And then how do you address them? So, with that preamble, what I'm going to do now is invite Ankita from UNCDF to talk a little bit about why they decided to focus on norms as a part of their work on promoting women's financial health in India. So, Ankita, over to you.
Thanks, Nisha. Thank you for that introduction and setting that context. Um, Constantine, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So, a woman in rural part of India who owns a bank account and has access to a loan for her business, we can safely assume for her to be financially included. We know it is a celebration for us to see the number of financially included women increase. But what does this financial inclusion mean for her? Let's try and explore that through some examples from our recent field visit to Odisha in eastern India. Slide, please. Seema here has a savings account in a bank that is less than a mile from her house, but she still chooses to save her money in boxes at home in the kitchen where her husband rarely visits. For her, the privacy of her savings is the most important thing, which is taken away from her every time she visits her bank branch. She stands to face emotional and verbal abuse from her husband if he finds out that she's kept away some of the money she withdrew from the bank. Slide, please. Meena here, she runs a small business around tailoring and mushroom growing that gets her a steady monthly income. So through the government's program, she has and actually has a very easy access to a loan to expand her business. But she's scared. She feels that her community will look down upon her because a woman should not burden her family with her debt. She fears that if she's not able to return the loan in time, her in laws will stop her from running her business completely. And with that income gone, she will also lose the little agency that she has earned in her own home. Slide, please. This is Durga. She is a newly married woman. She prefers walking to her local, trusted post office than, going to and engaging with the local banking agent in the market, mostly because he is a man. She worries that if she visits the agent too frequently, her relatives will question her integrity and she will bring about shame on her family. If she were to visit the banking agent, she would have to go either with her husband or with a couple of women from her family or her village. And that would take away the privacy of her savings. So when you look at all of these cases, you'll notice, slide please, you'll notice that women are financially included with access to formal financial services, but they're not necessarily relevant or tailored to her needs. It is no surprise then that 77% of women account holders in India, almost 40% of the accounts are dormant. So when you look at these cases, when you look at these statistics, it indicates two things. On one hand, we understand that structural changes alone are not enough to secure women's financial lives. There is this compelling need to unpack the hidden tenets that shape women's behaviors. On the other hand, we need to understand that just because a woman is financially included, it does not imply that she has the ability or the agency to manage day-to-day expenses, save for financial emergencies, or have control of her financial life. If we go through all these above examples, these behaviors are largely governed by the social norms prevalent in her community. Slide, please. So when we look at these two premises, they were, central to our partnership with the government of Odisha, which is called the Mission Shakti Living Lab. Mission Shakti is a flagship program of the state government that aims to empower women entrepreneurs socially and economically by organizing them in self-help groups. Presently, about 7 million women organized into 600,000 SHGs throughout Odisha benefit from the program. Under the initiative, almost all women members have access to a bank account in the nearest bank branch. Our aim over the next 4 years is to improve the financial health outcomes such as security, resilience, and control of low-income rural women and women entrepreneurs. Slide, please. So when we started to design the strategy for this program, we started reflecting upon our experience of working with gig economy in Malaysia, the aging population in China, and women in India. And what that experience really told us is that social norms which are at play, whether at the community level or at the household level, have critical bearings on two aspects. One, people's access to resources, whether it is skills or business capacity or access to capital. And on the other hand, they affect their financial behavior. How do people spend, save, borrow, and plan? This behavior in turn determines if individuals and communities are financially secure or resilient. For a woman, this behavior is highly conditional on what sanctions will she face if she were to break a norm. So if we want to shape behaviors in any way and design products that work for her, we must understand the grasp of hold of social norms on her life. At the same time, what we thought that, okay, if what if we were to reverse this and try and see how do social norms respond to a stimulus, like if we were to change access to resources or behavior. And there were some very interesting examples in the field that we came across, which basically highlighted to us the power of a collective and the role a sponsor can play in bending or even transforming the norms. Slide, please. So here we visited this group that has been running for the last 15 years. Over the years, they took out small loans to expand their business, and today they have the confidence to apply for a big loan to buy machinery. They earn a steady income, annually that supports their needs. Along with their business, they take care of their housework because even today they feel that their family is their first priority. But having said that, these women don't think that curtails their agency in any sense. As a group, they have more control over how they utilize their loan and not spending on household consumption. Their husband and families have less control over this money that is parked in the self-help group account. In fact, when they take a loan as a group, it reduces their fear of paying it back and tends to increase their risk appetite. So together, they have created this reliable social insurance and a collective that gives them a sense of power and security over their income. Slide, please. Yeah. While we were interacting, we also observed that, what is very essential to this whole process is to bring men into the fold when working on social norms. Here we have Tara, who's married to her husband for over 20 years. Today, she heads her self-help group, and she's been instrumental in the success at their collective livelihood. Today, she's also seen as a somewhat of a local influencer for both women and men from the village who approach her for counsel. But this journey hasn't been very easy for her. She has worked really hard to create a conversation with her husband around having a family and having a savings plan. She took care of the family while she took care of the business to make sure that there were no loose ends in her working. And over time, her husband saw the merit in having an extra income, and he realized the importance of a woman having a saving of her own. So today, he actively engages with other men in his community to encourage separate savings by women for long term household needs. Slide, please. When you look at all of these cases, what we observed and felt that for women, financial health is like playing an infinite strategy game. So in this game, you overcome obstacles and you reach the next stage by either prioritizing resources or by making allies. And at every stage, a woman must get past the social norms to open possibilities of driving change and moving on to the next stage. Financial interventions can act as a power booster for women if they are designed to shape not just their behaviors, but also the norms that drive it. Only then will women move from access to absorption of services, and which will probably pave the way to achieve resilience and control in their financial lives. And with this thought in mind, we our goal is to realize financial health outcomes for 3.5 million women and build 10,000 women micro enterprises. To do this, our strategy is to move the spotlight from the destination to this journey, and with that, create meaningful financial systems that work for women. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ankita. I think that's a very powerful setting of the stage to kind of unpack how norms shape women's behaviors and then ultimately impact how far they can go in their financial health journeys. Moving from Ankita, what I'm going to invite Daria, but just before I do that, I already see a question in the chat, but I wanted to remind you, if you have questions for Ankita or as Daria speaks, please put them in the chat, and others who might like the same question, you can vote them up, and we'll have some time at the end of the session to take all of those questions. So keep them coming. And then moving back, so Daria, I'd like to invite you to share a little bit of, what GIZ through the Her and Now project is doing in terms of, going past identifying norms to actually actively addressing them. This was very exciting to hear about. So I'm sure everybody who's listening in will find it equally insightful.
Thanks, Nisha, and a very warm welcome from my side as well to all of you out there. I would like to present to you today the Heard Now film campaign. This film campaign has been developed by a GIZ project in India, which has the goal to create an enabling environment for women-led enterprises. And to achieve this goal, we work on two levels. On the one side, we offer business support programs for women entrepreneurs where they can learn the critical business skills to start or scale up a business. This is the capacity building component of the project. And on the other hand, we want to steer positive mindset change towards women entrepreneurship. And this is the behavioral change component of the project. We conceptualize this project in such a way because we believe if you want to create an enabling environment for women entrepreneurs, you have to work on these two levels simultaneously. And I would like to start the presentation today by sharing a scene of one of the films from this campaign. And then I would like to use this scene to show you how we try to bring across certain key messages in the moderated discussions which we have with the audience after the film screenings. Next slide, please. So the film I picked for today's presentation is called Be Selvi and Daughters. And before I give you a brief summary of the plot, I would like to point out the title of this film, because the title is already in a way steering a mindset shift. If you are familiar with the Indian context, you may know that many shops and stores in India are called the name of the father and sons. But you never find any business plates out there which have the name of the mother and daughters. So the title is already expanding the idea of who could be a business owner. I would also like to highlight here that this film has been produced by an all-women crew. And this is, of course, unusual in the industry everywhere in the world, but especially in India. The main protagonist of this film is called Selvi, and she's a 50-year-old housewife from Chennai, which is in the southeast of India, and she sells saris on WhatsApp as a side hustle. And one day her daughter visits her and she forces a sudden explosion of sari orders. And this is the point where Selvi has to decide if she wants to take the opportunity to start a full-fledged company. And the story of this film is basically following the journey of Selvi taking a leap as an entrepreneur. Next slide, please, Costa. This is the opening scene of the film. Selvi is at a bank office. It's a very busy place. There are a lot of men around. She's the only woman. You can see that she's feeling not really comfortable in this environment. And then she approaches the bank officer and she's treated with indifference by him. And Selvi quickly realizes that she has filled in the wrong form to open the bank account. And the bank officer reacts to this very impatiently. And this makes her feel even more uncomfortable and a bit humiliated, and she just wants to escape the situation. Next slide, please. So this scene depicts two sets of social norms and biases. On the one hand, we have women who are oftentimes not really comfortable in situations where they have to engage with formal finances. They feel they don't have the adequate knowledge to interact with the bank officers, and they are not regularly exposed to such environments, so they feel a little bit out of place. And the social norm at work here is that women are usually not expected to deal with financial matters, let alone to engage with bank officers. So this is a very unfamiliar situation for many women. And then on the other hand, we have the bank officers who oftentimes perceive women entrepreneurs as not really serious business owners. They don't consider them as capable of running a business. And many times women-led enterprises are considered high risk because it's assumed that the women don't have the required skills to run a profitable business. And the social norm here again is that women are not really considered as economic agents. They are at most considered as secondary earners. So for them, running a business can never be the priority in their life. Next slide, please. So here are some of the key messages which we like to bring across in the moderated discussions which take place after the screenings of these films. And most importantly, we want to highlight the contribution of women-led enterprises to the economic potential growth of India. We also want to highlight that it's very beneficial for the families and the wider communities if the women participate in the economy, because women tend to invest most of their income into the immediate family and communities. We also want to debunk the assumption that women-led enterprises are higher risk, because in fact, women tend to have lower default rates than men when it comes back to repaying their loans. And we want to especially address the male audience and try to bring across the message that it's very important to normalize and open up conversation about finances with their daughters, with their wives, sisters, and mothers. And we also want to point out that financial independence is really important when it comes to the well-being and the security of the daughters and sisters, because we know that financial dependence oftentimes goes hand in hand with unhealthy and violent relationships. Of course, we also use this opportunity to link up the women attending the screenings to our own support programs, but also other business support programs where they can learn about finances. Next slide, please. Now I would like to say a few words about the vision, the target group, and the development process of this campaign. So as you have figured already, most likely the objective is to change mindset and tackle stereotypes. Why did we use films as a tool for this? We believe that films are a powerful tool, most of all because it's consumed by the masses, especially in India. We wanted to create high-quality cinematic films with a compelling storyline, which showcase relatable role models. So protagonists who the audience can identify with. We use films as an infotainment tool through which we want to entertain and educate the audience. So in a sense, the films work as a hook to attract the audience who otherwise would not be very interested in the topic. Next slide, please. The main target group are women who play with the idea of becoming an entrepreneur, the so-called fence-sitters, and we hope to inspire them to start a business. Another target group, as Ankita already pointed out, are male family members because we believe that they are crucial allies when it comes to social norm transformations. And the third target group are key opinion leaders, and this could be, for example, the media. Next slide. The film campaign is the result of an India-wide film competition. So in 2019, we asked Indian filmmakers to submit a script on the topic of women entrepreneurship. We shared with them the vision and the objective of the film campaign, but besides this, they had the complete creative freedom to write their own scripts. And we received more than 100 entries, and out of these, we selected 4 ideas. So we selected 2 fiction ideas, 1 documentary, and 1 animation film. And then the filmmaker teams received a grant to shoot these films over a period of 3 months. Next slide, please. Here are some impressions from the film shoots. Next slide, please. So the films are currently screened all over India, either by our project or by our partners, and we work with NGOs, with colleges, with women organizations, also incubators, so wide range of partners, but we also offer the films to institutions, organizations who want to independently use the films in their work. And for them, we specifically developed a film kit and a moderation guideline, which gives them some kind of guidance and inspiration how they can use the films in their work. And we're also very happy that the films have been screened in many film festivals across the world. Next slide, please. So far, we have conducted 51 screenings, and more than 6,000 people have seen the films. And the films have been selected by 17 international film festivals and already won 5 awards. Okay. Next slide, please. So yes, thank you very much for the attention. And if you have any questions or want to screen the films yourself, please get in touch with me. And I'm happy to share more information, also the material. Okay, thanks. Back to you, Nisha.
Great, thank you, Daria. I think that's really, really powerful. Films are a very popular medium all over the world, but especially in India. We have multiple language film industries, and it's such a part of the culture that using something like that to message around something around, gender norms and financial inclusion can be a very powerful tool. So really excited to hear about what you've done and what some of the results have been. We do have a few questions from the audience, but I'm going to actually start with a question of my own for both our speakers, and share, the question that I get all the time from people is that norms are so, context specific, and they're also very sensitive because you're talking about gender relations and power dynamics. So the one big question I get is it appropriate for financial inclusion stakeholders to focus on norms change or work in that space? So Ankita, do you want to start?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself. So I think Nisha, in fact, the impact of gender norms is not just restricted to the women or the community that she resides in, but actually it has a major impact on the institutions that actually serve her. So whether it is the policymakers, whether it is the frontline workers, or it is the financial service providers. So I mean, we were in the field, and this example was really interesting to us because we were talking to the last mile service officers, and they acknowledge the norms that exist. It's not like they don't know about it, but it's just that they are given a script to work with. And they there are existing practices that are already there for the institutions, so they just have to follow that. And what is very critical is that they don't even have the right kind of tools to handle the dynamics of social norms at the community level. So, you know, so the question you ask, I think it is even more compelling after looking at this to handle, norms at an institutional level and understand and translate that into the services and the design of that services.
Great, thanks. Daria, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I think also we saw in Ankita's presentation earlier that it's really not enough to just give them access. We really have to go one step further and try to address these deep-seated social norms, which then actually lead them to use these bank accounts as well. So it's basically the first, I would say it's almost the first step to work around social norms interventions in any project related to financial inclusion.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a little bit of can we afford not to address social norms in financial inclusion? Because by providing financial inclusion or financial access to financial services, you're already wading into it. And if you really want to see some impact of your interventions and actually contribute to meaningful inclusion, we definitely have to. I know both of you had questions for each other, so instead of me asking all the questions, maybe I'll let you both reflect on each other's presentation, and then we'll open it up to some audience questions. So Ankita, yeah, I'll let you start.
Yeah. So, Daria, what I was very curious to, understand that, you must have observed how the films and, the messages that each film carries, how does it translate into from knowledge into behavior? Like, what is the level of exposure that, you need from the audience to make that change in behavior?
Yes, thanks for this question. I think we have to be, of course, realistic here, right? With one film screening, you don't transform those deep-seated patterns and expectations around economic participation of women. But what we try to do is unpack some of them. We try to kind of educate the audience about some of the misconceptions. And what we hope for is that they leave the screening maybe a little bit more mindful, maybe a little bit more educated about some of these norms and biases which exist. And as a general outlook also of this project is that we And I think in this we actually succeed quite well, that we want to expand the expectation of who can be an entrepreneur, right? And we really put a lot of effort in it to showcase these relatable role models who the audience really can identify with. So this is really the heart of this film's campaign, the relatable role models. And from what we know, we have like some small interviews after these screenings. There are some improvements there, that some aha moments happen, that okay, this woman has done it, so maybe I could also. So I think in this sense we kind of seeing some impact, but of course we don't have the result after one screening that someone completely changes their behavior. That would be unrealistic.
Thanks,
Daria. I think, role models and being able to see what's possible can be very powerful, but you almost have to keep repeating the message multiple times in different ways for it to really sink in. And I know you had a question for Ankita as well, right?
Yes. So I was wondering, we discussed like quite a spectrum already of social norms, and I wanted to know from you, like, what would you consider the most challenging social norms you're addressing in your work?
There are so many. If I had to pick one, I think it would be the norm that men should be in charge of the money at the household level. Because from a practical perspective, what we also notice that gender norms affect women definitely, but they affect men as well. So what was interesting is we came across quite a few families where the husband really support the women, and they encourage them to earn their income and basically be in charge of that. But what is interesting is that these very men, when they go out in the community, then the community, they'll always get these snide remarks and comments constantly telling them that you're not a man enough because you don't hold the purse strings in your house. And that prevents men from going that another step ahead. So for him, it becomes very important that my wife should take care of the household, because I have to show to the outside world that that part is taken care of. So that brings us to the point that it's so important to work with men at the same time, if we want to work around the space of norms. And what we need to constantly drive is that for a woman, financial health is the financial well-being of a family, and especially that of her children. And it doesn't have to do with the power dynamics that come with an income.
Great, thanks. So I see a bunch of questions, some conversation going on in the chat, and I'll pick up on your last point, Ankita, and ask the question that was sort of related to it, which was around, the importance of working with men. But have you seen any sort of sustainable strategies of working with men? Because going household to household, or that might be a little too expensive and outside the remit of, say, anybody working in services.
See, I think we can, it's important to look at these analogous examples that come from the health sector, public health sector, where, whether it is related to, reproductive and child health, a lot of these examples are out there where people have worked with, and especially in India, and including communication campaigns and education, entertainment programs, which and the idea is that there is very little done in the financial sector, yes, but that's where we can take inspiration from and work with. And the idea is that going door to door is anyway not going to work. Like IEC campaigns don't always work out, but it has to be powerful mediums like A, media, B, the very fact that when men can see an income coming in, that and this constant conversation around savings, that has to be taken up in more creative ways. And because I think we are exploring the whole idea of social norms, and over there only we'll find the answers, what drives what is the reason why men also conform to certain social norms? So that should
Yeah,
be
I
what
think
I'm asking.
yeah, I think that's a very important message, that to be able to affect change and see how to change behavior, you will first need to understand in a much more concrete way what is driving that behavior, what are some of their incentives, and how do you either tweak them, change them, create a new normal for both men and women.
Mm.
So I will pick up another question. There was one for Daria, which is, are you thinking about breaking these up into smaller films? You know, like this, the Biselvian Daughters is, I don't know how long, I can't remember, but are you thinking of, packaging it differently and making it available in different ways? Is that a part of the film kit?
Yes, so the films are short films, so they are already rather short. So Bisalvi, for example, is only 25 minutes. So the idea is, so the film campaign was conceptualized as a package, a film package. So you watch 4 films in 1 hour, and then you have discussion of 1 hour afterwards. So it's like a little complete program. But what we've seen in practice now is that oftentimes our partners just pick one specific film and show it, which maybe is more relatable to the audience they have, or which has like a specific local context. So this is how it looks like. It's usually only one film screened per event. We haven't really considered making it smaller. Maybe that's actually something to think about, to have short bites, and then make a campaign out of this as well. But so far, it's a full movie screen.
Great. I will take one of the questions that seems to be the most popular and was put early on, and it's a larger question around, we call these invisible barriers or invisible fences. So jumping invisible fences is a lot of work. Who has the responsibility to remove these fences? You both sit in different stakeholders, GIZ as a funder and facilitator around change in financial inclusion, and similarly UNCDF. Who do you think, is it a collective responsibility, which means it's no one's responsibility? Do we expect providers to take that on? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I would say, Nisha, that I think it's everybody's responsibility, isn't it? I mean, norms were one of the reasons also norms exist is because we also live with them. And so it's not just, so we have to create the tools, whether it is with policymakers or whether it is with development sector partners or with, private sector. But end of the day, we also have to give the tools to the community in different ways, because it's up to them to decide also which norms they want to break, which one they want to bend. So it is, I think, everybody's responsibility. And it's like a jigsaw puzzle, so everybody has to put in their piece um, to do this change.
Sarah, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I agree 100%. I think it's a collective responsibility. I think it has to start quite early, because these social norms and expectations are inflated at a very early age. So I think it's crucial that we work with, for example, for us, we work with already colleges too late, but it would even better to work with schools on this, kind of also create this idea amongst young girls that entrepreneurship is a career choice, right? You don't have to just think about getting a job at a corporate or something, but that you actually can start something on your own. So I think this is crucial, starting at a very young age. And then from the supply side, and in terms of the development sector, if we conceptualize project, I think it's crucial to bring this perspective always in, even if it's not immediate to us. But I think in almost all of the topics we work on, social norms play an important role, and that's not only regarding gender, but in other focus areas as well. So to kind of have this in mind when we conceptualize our projects.
Yeah, I agree. It is a collective responsibility. As globally, there's a push for gender equality, and if we want to achieve that, we have to actually understand how norms are, shaping inequities, creating an unlevel playing field, and work with all the actors in that system to then create change. I know that the criticism that often is if it's everybody's responsibility, it's no one's, but I think it does actually require a concerted multi-party effort. You can't just work with one actor because, every part of the system needs to change to make it work better for women and men. Um, there were some specific questions. So, Ankita, there was one for you when you talked about social capital in terms of access to resources. Could you elaborate a bit more about what you meant by that? And then I'll just tag on another.
Social capital, did you say?
Yeah, social capital.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So social capital, what we wanted to say in when we decided our framework for financial health, we looked at, okay, on one side you need your human resources, which are your skills, your capabilities. You need financial resources, whether you have an income, access to land and assets, and then a social capital. That to do business, we all need a network, whether it is at the level of the household, your family, within your neighborhood, and the larger business community, institutions that are working. So that is largely the social capital we refer to.
And there was a related question, sort of on the group effort itself, which was, you mentioned women coming together as a group. How can we ensure that their own individual transaction history is built to and not only the one in the group? So I think this relates to how the self-help groups actually work, that, women build their own individual credit histories as well as a group. Uh, is that accurate?
Uh, well, I can talk about this particular program where generally SGs build their credit history. It's for the entire self-help group to, but if in this program, what it also allows you, let's say if your self-help group is not ready to take up a loan, they have created ways for a woman who has her own savings to create a loan depending upon what is the kind of business that she wants to enter. So but as such, it is largely the self-help group's history.
Great. All right. I'm going to, as moderator, actually jump in with a question of my own, because I can. So, Daria, I wanted to ask you, so based on your work in designing this campaign, um, what would your key messages be for some others who would want to design something similar? Like, where should they start? Who should they work with? What are some, pitfalls they should be very mindful of?
Um, yes, so I think for us, which worked really well, is that we tried to work with very professional filmmakers. So we really had this aspiration to create the cinematic short films. So we didn't want to have like this typical preachy NGO style films. So our, like you have seen, our films are actually also screened in film festivals, so they are really nice to watch. And I think that's crucial if you want to attract a wide audience who's not really maybe that much into the topic itself. To attract them to the movies, you need to have like cinematic short films. And then we also tried to have rather subtle messages. So the storyline, it's a storyline, so it's not just preaching one message after the other. So the focus is on the protagonists. And as I mentioned earlier, we really try to have the relatable role models in there. So I think that's the most crucial part. And I also would say, if you work with the concept of having moderated discussions, that you look for local moderators, do deep briefing with them, try to find someone who speaks the local language, and try to sensitize them to the messages you want to bring across in the screenings. And we also try to have a really nice setup. So these are usually open air cinema experiences. So we have a a really nice setup. We have some kind of incentives for people to join. So there's usually like a small playground for kids, some free food sometimes. So to make it like a really nice outing, maybe for the whole family. So you have not only the women participating, but also the male family members, which sometimes has been a little struggle for us. We tend to have more women in these screenings than men. So this is one way how you can attract men as well to join. That would be maybe some
Great.
points.
That's some very useful tips and insights. Ankita, one of the things we said that it's very important to understand how social norms play out if you want to actively address them. So my question is, is there anything you need to do different in terms of how you actually explore them in your research, the way you sort of focus on understanding the behaviors of women? If we really want to have a deeper understanding of norms and how they impact all the stakeholders, women, men, communities, financial service providers.
Yeah, I mean, see, from a research perspective, what we also figured, in this journey is that when you open the box, it's like a Pandora's box, and everything's gonna get out. So you have to also sort of at some point understand which are the norms that you want to work with and which are the ones that you have to let go for now, because the challenge is that the social norms don't adhere to the program timelines. It has to be a longer term work, so we have to pick and choose which ones are the one which are more malleable at this moment, which ones are already relaxing, can we work and shift that needle on that end. So I think what becomes very crucial is to understand which behaviors should be prioritized, and which ones are the norms that can more easily be worked upon over time, rather than take up a very difficult norm and not be able to change it. So that's, and also look at, I think what was very interesting for us to understand was how the community responds to it. So for example, a woman taking a loan is a norm that is sort of relaxing, considering that this program provides them easy loans. So that's something that we need to first maybe look at that, rather than going into something like changing the whole order of the way things work.
Great. One of the questions which I'm going to slightly reframe is, around what are the factors that we see are present in locations or areas where there is more female entrepreneurship, or women have access to more financial services in a more meaningful way. What do you think are, the factors that contribute to it? So it's almost like what norms are absent over there, maybe. Sorry, yeah.
Should I just go?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, so it's very interesting. The two sites that we are working on, one of them is a very entrepreneurial belt of Odisha, the Ganjam district. And women over there are known for making their products cheaper and, making it more efficient so that, they can sell it very fast. So over there in that community, it is accepted that women are going to work, because most of the men are also migrant laborers or workers in other towns and cities. So it's quite accepted. But all those women have to hide the money from their husband, because they know that it's going to be spent on things that are not priority for them. So while it's very accepted that you will go out, your mobility is not at all affected. But the fact that, if I go to the bank and people know from my family that, oh, I must have gone to the bank, there is a certain type of transaction, I have to sort of stop that. So then what we also noticed, that there are some of these groups who are a little bit more advanced. What they will do is they'll call the banking correspondent into their SHG. So it sort of solves their problem of deposit and withdrawal. But that's again something that you evolve over time. Like, these are SGs who work for 10 years, 12 years, they understand the system, and plus the cohesion is much stronger. So that's the difference that we saw in places.
Great. Daria, do you want to add anything?
Yes, maybe to add, I mean, of course, there's a push towards entrepreneurship in India, also, of course, from the policymakers, and we see more women taking up entrepreneurship. But we still have to see as well that these are all very small scale enterprises, a lot of them home based, which, of course, again, we see that's due to social norms. Also, the sectors the women operate in are usually traditional sectors for women, so we hardly see any women entrepreneurs entering more male dominated sectors yet. So it's still a long way to go. But I'm very glad to see this entrepreneurial spirit taking up more and more. And with our entrepreneurs we work with, it's great to see how they evolved within 2 years from very small enterprises. If you give them the right support, how they can actually scale them up, and that's really promising to see. And I hope there will be more of this in the future.
Great. I'm going to take one last question. I think it's for you, Ankita, on the question of who controls money, the man or the woman. Do you have some data that you've collected on that, right?
Yeah. So see, our research, the first leg that we've done was mostly qualitative in nature, and it was more of an exploratory research. So I wouldn't have hard data on that, but what we observed largely the observation was that women, and that's where it gets complex. Women are the one who decide, who are going to take care of the household, whether it is saving for your children's education, whether it is for emergencies, whether it is for any event, but they don't have control over the money. They might always keep saving some amount and keeping it away, but largely they don't control the income. So even women, we noticed, who were bringing home some income, it goes into that, the larger pool that goes into the house. And so for her to control the purse strings, it's very difficult, and there is a lot of manipulation from the woman's end to make sure that that she is finding some money to save for her children and for emergencies.
Great, thanks. I think we're down to the last 2 minutes of this session. So I wanted to ask first, both of you, if you have any sort of one message you want to leave this audience with. What would it be? One piece of advice or something to think about or something they should be doing? Daria, do you want to start?
Sure. Yes. I think for me, this would be, and I've pointed this out many times in the last hour, the relatable role models. I think that's the most important thing, because otherwise you have to meet the people where they are, right? And then if you kind of expose them to a situation where they can see, this is how they do it over there in the cities, but this is how it's been done in our place, then it's very difficult. But if you meet them with role models from their own community, then I think you actually have a chance to change something. So that would be my advice, to really work with the local context and with relatable role models.
Great, thanks. Ankita?
Just as an extension to what Daria said, one is, of course, meeting where they are. Plus, because women are such a different group of people, they're not just one segment, they're not homogenous. So I think what really matters is to understand the different profiles of women and look at what is driving their needs, what is their experience which drives their needs. So I think that's where it becomes important to collaborate, with like-minded partners on, carrying forward this whole financial health agenda that we have over here.
Great, thank you. I think those are very, very important messages. You need to understand what is driving behavior. You need to understand women are not a monolith. They have intersectional identities, which are shaped by life stage, location, education, so many factors. And we need to consider that, because that really shapes what they can and cannot do, how they do it, and what opportunities they have access to. I'm going to close this session with just one message from my side, that, in terms of women's financial inclusion, We want to focus on increased access. We want women to have more agency, more decision-making power. But unless there's a change in collective expectations, which is norms, a woman may never be able to behave in a manner that can fully exercise her agency without facing sanctions. So we really can't afford to ignore norms. We have to, it's an imperative for achieving women's financial inclusion and economic empowerment to understand and address these invisible barriers to that women face. With that, I will close this session. Thank you, Ankita. Thank you, Daria. Thank you, Costa, and the Financial Inclusion Week team. And I hope to listen into many more interesting conversations over the next few days. Thank you.
Thank you.